You will make it through. The Fitrah is awake in you. With Quran and Sunnah by your side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through. You will make it through. The Fitrah is awake in you. With Quran and Sunnah on his side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through. With Quran and Sunnah on his side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through.
Diluting Al Wala Wal Bara, Volume 2, the red and black. And we'll be ending this chapter, pages 91 through 94. The awakening, the total eclipse of the heart. We're going to end it by speaking about how once the heart has eclipsed and the Fitrah has awakened, we then embrace allegiance and disassociate from everything that stands between that awakening and what will cause that awakening to dim. But let's go over a couple of questions just to make sure you guys understand the awakening process. Question number 1, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios and see if you can recognize what triggered these scenarios. Let's see if you can recognize what triggered these scenarios, because it could be you. Maybe something could happen in your life to trigger such a scenario for you, an awakening for you. Abdullah reads a verse of the Quran. This verse inspires him so much that he stops smoking. This is an example of which type of awakening? Is it an example of divine guidance? Because we spoke over the past 2 weeks about how some awakenings can be divinely inspired. What does that mean? The word divine, because I've had several sisters ask the question, what does divine mean? This is an English word, and we don't use it in American English. We don't use the word divine in American English. Okay, divine means comes from God. It means godly. I want everybody to write that down. Divine means godly. It comes from God. So when you hear divine guidance, it means guidance that was brought on by God. In other words, Allah's guidance. So Abdullah reads a verse of the Quran that touches his heart in such a manner that it inspires him to quit smoking. Is that divine guidance or godly guidance? Or is this an example of influential guidance? In other words, he was guided by an influential person. Or is this an example of self-discovery? When he read that verse of the Quran, did it inspire him to discover himself? Or is this more an example of spiritual craving. Now remember, it could be all four, but which one is most correct? Which one is most correct of these answers? Which answer?
Divine guidance.
And why do you say divine guidance?
Yeah, divine guidance.
Why would you say it's more that?
I say it's more that because he was being inspired by reading the Quran, and the Quran is the word of Allah. So that's why I say it's by divine guidance.
Do you guys agree with her answer? Does everyone agree that is the most correct?
I agree. I know.
Good job. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. The most correct answer would be divinely guided. You know, and that can happen to any of us. A lot of times it can happen to most of you. Many of you were divinely guided. I want y'all to write down the meaning of divine, because I was surprised to find out that a lot of you American Muslims who speak English, this is your language, you didn't know what the word divine means. Divine, I tell you guys, don't be ashamed to carry a dictionary in your pocket. Believe it or not, I keep a dictionary on my cell phone. Okay? Okay, divine means godly. I know we don't hear this word much, especially in American English, because we speak more hip-hop English. Even, you know, Americans use hip-hop English. We have a dictionary called urban. Our language, the English in America, has become so torn and filtered and destroyed that we have an urban dictionary now. Okay, so don't be ashamed. Carry a dictionary. Divine means godly. Okay, it's not a word that you hear every day, so don't be ashamed to ask or look up the meaning. So this is more divinely, more godly, because like she said, the words came from Allah. And the Quran, I want everyone to write it down. The Quran is not the creation of Allah either. The Quran is not the creation of Allah. The Quran is the words of Allah. This is Allah speaking to us. So it's definitely divinely guided. Those are the words of Allah. Allah is telling you something. He's communicating to us on purpose to touch our heart. So that definitely is divinely, godly inspired. Good job. Okay, here's another scenario. I tried to keep the quizzes real simple for you guys today, because you may encounter a total eclipse of the heart, an awakening of the heart. Look at the next scenario. Amina, she feels that her life is missing something. She feels empty. Her life seems to be empty, and she feels that she's lacking something in her life. So she makes a decision to move to Morocco to be around Muslims. She decides she doesn't want to live in a secular world anymore, a secular environment. So she decides to get more primitive, more closer to Allah, away from all this secularism. So she moves to Morocco to be around more Muslims, a more Islamic environment. This is an example of which type of awakening? Is it more of an example of spiritual craving and inner conflict? Or is this more of an example of an awakening due to adversity? And adversity means hardship. That's a synonym for the word hardship. Or is this an example of an awakening of the heart due to a near-death experience? Or is this an example of an awakening due to recognizing Allah's pleasure? It could be either one, but which one is this most likely related to? Okay, Sister Akiz and Sister Sakina said spiritual craving and inner conflict. What do you guys think? You guys agree?
I agree.
Yes.
Good job. Exactly. And why do y'all think it's more of a spiritual crave and an inner conflict?
Well, for me, living in the West, in the Western Hemisphere, living in America, there's nothing much you can do on your spiritual base because there's so many different things here. But if I move to Morocco, I know that there I can get submersed in my religion and knowing that I can go out and nobody's looking at me strangely. And that will stop the inner conflict of should I put on my hijab, should I not put on my hijab? Because I know there you have to put it on, and it's a requirement that if you go out of your house, you have to have it on.
Exactly. The fact that she feels that she's empty, that she's missing something, that's her desire. That's the conflict. Like they're saying, she's suffering with inner conflict. She's lacking something, missing something. She feels spiritually empty. Spiritually, she's craving something in this secular environment where everything here is not about religion. It's not about, rules and obligations. So moving to a Muslim country, like you're saying, she's obligated. You're expected to have some type of religious standards, some type of religious morals. So that's why it's more of a spiritual craving and an inner conflict craving. Good job.
Can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
Add something that's going to be in addition to this week's Friday Access to Laila Live.
Exactly.
Being that she's craving that, she also wants to be part of an environment where it's a community, like-minded people. They're faith-based. They keep you in line. They keep you reminded. You can feel like you belong. You defeat the loneliness. So this is the reason why she's craving, because not only is she saying that, she doesn't feel like, the conflict of putting the hijab, being looked down on or whatnot. If everyone around you is doing the same thing and they're promoting the positivity, and you guys all know what you are doing this for, you want to do it. So that is bringing you to those people in that community that's going to keep you encouraged in doing right and keeping your fitra strong.
Exactly. And like she said, this is going to be our topic Friday for the Ask Sister Laila live show, my Islam Q&A show on Friday. One of the sisters made a $100 donation, and this is the topic. We're going to talk about that Friday. Now that your fitra has been reawakened, how can we keep it? How can we maintain that connection to Allah? And like in this scenario here, this sister's fitra is awakened. How can she keep it open? Sometimes we may have to migrate. We may have to change our environment. Just like in the scenario yesterday, the story of Ibn Fudail, okay? Some of the early companions, some of the tabi'in, they moved. They changed their environment to not go back to being highway robbers, and alcoholics. You may have to change your environment to keep your fitra awakened, to keep it alive, to not go back to your old ways. Because remember, you're not a revert. That's why I was telling you, get the terminology together. You're not a revert. You're a convert. You can never revert to how you were before you came to this world, because nothing in this world will ever resemble anything in the hereafter. We can never go back to how we were before Allah had our souls blown into our mother's womb. That will never happen. You will never revert to how you were up there, but you can convert into a new lifestyle, into a new identity, into a new minhaj, into a new way of thinking. So if we would get the terminology together, that's the beginning. Stop calling yourself reverts. You're not a revert. When you revert, you bring in two. this way of life, your jahiliyyah, your ignorance, that smoking, drinking, sexing, talking to women, where there's no relationships. I want you new shahadas to really understand there's no relationships between men who are not your husband. Whatever friendships you had with men, you have to let that go. I don't care if you grew up with him. He can't be your friend anymore. He's not your husband. You can't sit around talking on the phone all night, WhatsApping, FaceTiming men who are not your husband. This is zina in Islam. I don't care if you've known him since you were 2 years old. He's not your husband. This is zina. You have to let that go. We don't have relationships with men that we're not married to. There's no friendships like that. You are a convert. You have to adapt a new way of living, a new lifestyle, a new ideology, a new identity, a new character, new way of existing. Let that jahiliyyah, that pre-Islamic ignorance go. Y'all understand? You have to change. You might have to leave, move to a different city, different state, different country to get away from all of that if you have to. Okay? Last question. Abdullah suffered a stroke and he almost died. After recuperating, he promised to make his life better by getting closer to Allah and becoming a better Muslim. This is an example of which type of awakening? Is this an awakening is this an example of a near-death awakening? Or is this an example of an awakening due to an adversity or a hardship? Or is this an example of an awakening due to recognizing Allah's pleasure? Which one is most correct? Most correct.
Else, what is awakening, near-death awakening?
Yes, I would say that too.
I say hardship, number 2.
Okay, it could be all three, but the most correct is number 1. This is an example of a near-death awakening. Why? Because he almost died. That's the key. He almost died. This was a near-death experience. And that happens to a lot of us. A lot of us, when we suffer with a near-death experience, that can trigger a total eclipse of the heart and cause our fitrah to reawaken. And you will hear people say, I almost died, so now I want to change. I don't want to ever go through that. I need to get my deeds together. I need to start praying, get more prayers under my belt. I need to get more good deeds under my belt. So a lot of these reawakenings of the heart occur after near-death experiences. Of course, it's a hardship, but when you almost faced with death, whoa, that'll shock you. Remember, the prophet said, never forget the destroyer of pleasure, and that's death. Death can scare the heck out of anybody. Because we all say, oh, I wished I was dead. Oh, I wished I was dead, until you get that visit. Oh, no. You'll be wishing you could come back. Nobody wants to die because it's final. Okay? So different things can trigger the total eclipse of the heart, as I call it, and it's a shame, but that's the state of man. Okay, that's how we are when we come into this world as human beings. It takes a shake up in life, to cause us to want to wake up, and change the condition of ourselves. And even, can y'all believe it? There are still some people that experience these experiences and still don't change, though. There's people that still say, well, I've survived it, And hey, I'm the bionic man, and they still go back to their old ways. They continue to drink. They continue to have sex out of wedlock. We got Muslims like this, guys. They experience near death. They experience this stuff and go back to smoking weed. They go back to messing around with women on the internet. Women go back to their old ways. You know, it's just really sad. So to end this chapter, you know, we're going to focus in on, again, the role that allegiance and disassociation plays, because again, all of this is part of that testimony of faith. When we declare La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are also pledging our allegiance to Allah, our allegiance to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our allegiance to each other, and our allegiance to this religion. And we're also pledging to distance ourselves from any and everything that comes between all of that, or conflicts with all of that. So Wala Wal Bara, those principles serve as a foundation for personal growth. Those principles encompass allegiance and love for what aligns with our Islamic values. Okay? These principles extend beyond our relationships with ourselves and with others, and they play a significant role in our individual growth. You're not going to grow as a Muslim unless you get your allegiance together, and unless you learn to disassociate from any and everything that contradicts our allegiance to Allah and this religion. Okay, so let's take a look at allegiance and disassociation in various contexts. Personal allegiance entails being steadfast in our faith and living in harmony with our Islamic values. This allegiance involves, number one, practicing this religion in its totality, not picking and choosing what parts of Islam to practice. And this is important because in 2025, we have women and men picking and choosing. We got men who are shaving their beard. They're listening to other famous speakers tell them that they can trim the beard when Allah says you can't. The Prophet Muhammad said you cannot trim your beard. Period. Dot. We got Muslim women that are wearing tight-fitting clothing because they're listening to brothers put out fatwas saying that they can because they're working as professional women. First of all, who said you can do that too? Okay, you can't do that. Okay, you can work, but you never compromise your Islamic laws for that. We have to dress the way Allah commanded. I used to work, I just retired, and I worked as a professional. I worked for the government, but I always wore abayas, and they were loose fitting. I always wore khimars like I am on this internet, and I was always the best dressed and stylish, just like I am. And I never compromised my Islamic values for that. Okay? So this allegiance involves practicing Islam, improving our character, and seeking knowledge of our religion to strengthen our faith. Okay? We don't compromise this stuff ever. Also, we have to surround ourselves with positive influences and distance ourselves from the negative influences. This is vital for our personal growth. You can work, but after the job, we don't go out for drinks. After the job, we don't go out and hang out with and smoke cigarettes. After the job, we don't go out with the men for dinner. We don't do that. We don't intermingle off the job like that. We have to be mindful of the company we keep, the media we consume, and the environments we immerse ourselves in. I was a professional for 36 years working for the government, and I was highly respected on my job. Subhanallah, my job they knew what I could do as a Muslim woman and what I couldn't do. Okay? So to apply allegiance and disassociation principles for our personal growth, we have to evaluate our current relationships and our influences. We have to reflect on our relationships and influences. We have to identify those who we align with and how they impact our faith and our growth goals. We have to nurture positive relationships and gradually distance ourselves from harmful or toxic consequences. Subhanallah, I worked for the Department of Developmental Disabilities. Okay? That's the department I worked for. We had cottages. You know what I did to protect my faith? I chose to work a cottage with all women. Oh, yes. To prevent myself from being in a toxic environment. I was young when I started working for the government. I had graduated from college. Okay? They hired me. I was hired by the governor of my state. Okay? He knew I was Muslim. I said, I want to work on a female college because I was good looking, young. I said, all females. He said, you got it. All my co-workers were women. Okay? I made sure that I distanced myself from harmful or toxic environment that could lead to toxic consequences. So you're going to have to do that. Keep your faith in mind. As I stayed with the government, my seniority grew. Where I've always had seniority and can choose my workplace. I always worked with women. I never worked with men. I was always high in seniority, and I chose my location, and I've always worked with women. My job never compromised my religious belief. Okay? You have to set boundaries and make conscious choices. Establish boundaries based on your faith and your values. Be intentional in your choices. Make sure that they align with your principles. I became a union steward. Oh, yeah, I became the vice president. Oh, yeah. I became chief steward too. Oh, yeah, I worked with women and men. But I was never one-on-one with no man. I always marched, always had my stewards with me. When I had to represent a person, I was never alone with a man. If I had to represent a male, I always had another person in the room with me, okay? When I had to arbitrate, when I had to mediate, because I became a paralegal too, later on as I grew up in position, I was never alone with a client. I never compromised my faith, never compromised my religion. And then when I wasn't doing the union business and had to go to my cottage and be what I was with the developmentally disabled, I worked a female unit. Hello. When the clients became aggressive and I had to deal with them with their gin possession, that's when we called for male backup. And I was never alone with a man. We had 10 men and 10 women. Hello, we could handle it. You have to set boundaries and make conscious choices on the workplace. I wore a bias to work every day. Kimars, like how you see me dressed on the internet, but I wore pants underneath my bias. So if I had to deal with a possessed client, I can take them down my abaya stretch. No client ever ripped my clothes off. My kimars go right inside like this. I'm still covered. No client ever ripped anything off. No man ever seen my body. No man ever seen my hair. My skin never showed. And I can take them down on the floor and hold him down in any type of hold that I had to put him in. No skin ever seen, because there was always pants on. Harem pants. I wore harem pants underneath. Oh yeah, Arabia, harem pants underneath my abayas. Make conscious choices. These fatwas, these brothers putting out, telling you sisters to compromise your deen because you're in a professional field, that's garbage. I was professional too. I never compromised my deen. You have to embrace new positive associations and habits. Seek positive associations and communities that support your growth. I had a strong Islamic community that supported me. They were Muslims too, like me, grassroots Muslims who didn't compromise their faith either. Okay? You have to engage in activities that enhance your understanding of Islam and encourage positive habits. So embracing Wala Wal Bara, embracing allegiance and disassociation principles is a powerful way to enhance your personal growth and spiritual transformation. It keeps your Fitrah alive and ignited. It helps you to remain loyal to your faith and values and principles while actively choosing positive influences. Okay? Your growth will continue. And by the way, I continue to teach every day on this internet. I was given dawah every day on this internet and working every day. And we got many examples from the Quran, many examples from the Sunnah, how the companions never compromised their faith either. So we have to plant the seed of allegiance and disassociation, just like we have to plant the tree of Tawheed. When that Fitrah, when the Fitrah within your heart awakens, that's when you get busy planting the tree of Tawheed in your heart. And we talked about that. The tree of Tawheed that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam planted in his. And when you plant that tree of Tawheed in your heart, you have to also put the seed of Wala Wal Bara in there too and nurture it. Nurture it with knowledge of allegiance. Because most Muslims don't know what allegiance to Allah entails. Most Muslims don't know what allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entails. They think that Wala Wal Bara is simply love and hate. I don't use those terms. No, it's allegiance and disassociation. We disassociate from anything that's not a part of our religion, such as birthdays. That's worshiping something other than Allah. We disassociate from holidays because we have no allegiance to those. Our allegiance is only to what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. We have no allegiance to the 4th of July. That's not a part of our way. We have no allegiance to Mother's Day because Islam teaches us to respect and honor our mother every day, not one day out the year. We have no allegiance to no New Year's Day because that's not a part of our way of life. There's no allegiance to any of that. Our allegiance is only to Islam, not any other way. So we have to plant the seed of allegiance and disassociation. And by nurturing those seeds, this is how we align ourselves with Allah's decree. This is how we uphold his commands and his prohibitions. And this is how it becomes a transformative process that influences our thoughts, our choices, our actions, and guides us towards a life that is in harmony with his guidance and pleasing to him. And that's how we keep that light of the Fitrah glowing and burning. So we're going to stop right there.